Adisebaba Fairy Tales and Bedtime Stories for Kids, Pollyanna. With her golden hair, always smiling face, Pollyanna was a 10-year-old little girl spreading joy around her. But she had lost her parents when she was really young and was left all alone. For some time, she stayed in the orphanage. After some time had passed, her wealthy aunt accepted to look after her. Her aunt, Miss Polly, prepared the small attic for Pollyanna. The housemaid Nancy was really happy about this. "Hopefully our little guest will be successful in cheering up grumpy Miss Polly." When arrived at home, Pollyanna was crying with happiness. She hugged her auntie around her neck, but her auntie was somewhat serious. She took Pollyanna and showed her to her room. Pollyanna was stunned when she saw the size and the wealth of this house. Her auntie showed her room in the attic. "This is your room, and dinner starts at 6 p.m. Don't forget." Pollyanna liked her room very much. Having seen all the other rooms in the house, Pollyanna did not bother to think once as to why her auntie gave her the room in the attic. Right at 6 o'clock, Miss Polly sat at the dinner table, but Pollyanna had not arrived yet. "Where is this girl?"
Would you like me to go and call her, Miss Polly?
"No." After dinner, Miss Polly went over to her room and noticed the room was empty. She immediately went over to the garden to tell the gardener that she was missing. The gardener, on the other hand, pointed over to a rock on the hill. She was over there. In a rush, Nancy ran over to Pollyanna, and together they made their way to the villa. Didn't matter what the situation was, Pollyanna always managed to keep a positive attitude about everything. This left Nancy amazed. She asked Pollyanna what the secret to this was.
The glad game. My father taught me this. When I was young, a very helpful lady once sent us crutches. When I asked as to why, she said, so that as long as they were in our sight, we would be able to appreciate the fact that we didn't need to use them and be glad. It is because of that day that whenever me and Daddy feel like we're in doubt, we think of that day and we find a reason to be glad.
Further into the evening, Pollyanna was in her room on her bed, crying hysterically.
Father, my father who lives amongst the angels. I'm trying to play our game, you know that. But if you were stuck in an attic, in the dark, sitting all by yourself, you too would find it hard to be glad.
The following day, Pollyanna went downstairs to the garden and hugged her auntie.
Auntie! Beloved auntie! This morning I am so grateful to be alive.
Is that how we say good morning? After having said this, Aunt Polly turned around and left. Watching them from afar, the old gardener's eyes went watery. He then went over to Pollyanna and told her how much she looked like her mother. Knowing that the gardener knew her mother made her happy. As time went on by, Pollyanna's life at the villa had gotten better. She would have her breakfast, then straight after, start doing her homework with her auntie. And then after lunch, she would have free time until 6 o'clock. She would even do some of the grocery shopping for the house. One day, in the town, she saw a man wearing a long black coat with a cylinder-shaped hat. Although she tried being friends with him, she couldn't make much sense out of what the man was saying to her. Some time had passed and she saw the same man again. She tried to talk to him once again. This time round, he too made conversation with her. Nancy was in shock because although the man, Mr. Pendleton, was very wealthy, he lived in a huge house all by himself and never ever did he speak to anyone. The following day, Pollyanna went home with a very weak dog. Miss Polly didn't say a word. But the following day after that one, she brought a boy home and Miss Polly was extremely cross with her. Enough, Pollyanna. Amongst all the other hideous things you've done, this is by far the worst. As if it wasn't enough that you brought all the cats and dogs from the streets, now you're bringing beggars to my house.
I'm not a beggar, madam.
After having said that, the boy rushed out of the house, but Pollyanna was determined to save this kid from the streets. In September, Pollyanna started school. It didn't take long for Pollyanna to like her school. One day, during a visit, Mr. Pendleton asked Pollyanna not to leave and if she could stay with him. Of course, it was impossible for Pollyanna to give an answer. Mr. Pendleton explained everything to Pollyanna.
Back when I was young, I fell in love with your mom. I loved her dearly. But your mom never loved me back. Then soon later, she married your father, and they moved away from the city.
Ever since that day, Mr. Pendleton always seemed to be upset towards the world around him. He would always have a long face. But having Pollyanna look like her mother with her sincere looks made it possible for him to look at the world in a more positive manner. This way, by having Pollyanna next to him all the time, he would have a reason to live.
Move next to me, and together we will be happy. You can see me as a father, and I'll see you like a daughter.
But although her auntie didn't show it, she knew she loved her very much. And she didn't want to leave her auntie. She didn't know how to tell this to Mr. Pendleton. At last, she found a solution. She wanted Mr. Pendleton to take Jimmy in, the kid her aunt refused to look after, and thought this way both Mr. Pendleton and Jimmy would be happy, and Pollyanna could visit them both more often. Mr. Pendleton asked for them to come together the following week. But after a few days, a very unfortunate accident happened. A car hit Pollyanna. After opening her eyes a day later in the hospital, Pollyanna was very happy to be alive. She didn't want her auntie to leave her side. She was living the happy moment of her auntie calling her my darling. A few days later, Pollyanna had left the hospital, but she could no longer use her legs. When Mr. Pendleton visited Pollyanna, he told Miss Polly about his offer to Pollyanna and how she rejected the offer due to her auntie. After hearing this story, Miss Polly's love suddenly grew much bigger for her. Just so that her niece would be happy, she would allow the cats and dogs to go up to her room. She would allow anything that made Pollyanna happy. The doctor that they had been waiting for from the city came 1 week late. After Pollyanna's checkup, the doctor had to give the bad news.
Unfortunately, this young girl will not be able to walk.
Oh no! After hearing this, Miss Polly began to cry and soon after fainted. After hearing her auntie's voice, Pollyanna began to cry hysterically. Right then, everyone was waiting for bitter, sad days. Everyone was shedding away their tears for her. Pollyanna began to tell everyone that visited her about the glad game. In order to make Pollyanna happy, Mr. Pendleton decided to adopt Jimmy. When Pollyanna heard the good news, she was so happy. Miss Polly couldn't believe that she was the only one that didn't know the glad game. Once she began talking to Nancy, she found out about everything. She then quickly rushed over to Pollyanna. So, the glad game. From now on, we will play this game together.
Yay! This is by far the best news, Aunt Polly.
Meanwhile, Mr. Pendleton's doctor wanted to see Pollyanna. But there was one problem. Due to an argument they had many years ago with Miss Polly, he hadn't stepped a foot into that house for 15 years. In the end, both ends had come to an agreement and they took her to a hospital out of the city. Mr. Pendleton's doctor looked after Pollyanna and said that there is hope. A few months had passed. Auntie Polly received a letter from Pollyanna.
Dearest Aunt Polly, I have great news. My therapy has ended with great results. At last, I can walk. The doctors here say that I can return home soon. Wish I could walk the way back. Oh, how happy I am. Everything makes me happy. In fact, I'm even happy that I couldn't use my legs for some time. Because if it didn't happen, I would never appreciate them as much as I do now. Hoping to see you soon. With love, Pollyanna.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Heidi. Due to the loss of her parents, her auntie was taking care of her. But one day, she took Heidi to her grandfather's little hut in the mountains. Grandfather Elm was a grumpy old man who lived in a small hut on the Alps. This was the first time that Heidi saw her grandfather. Telling him that she had found a job in another city, Heidi's aunt left Heidi with her grandfather and returned to the city. Grandfather Elm, who was used to living an isolated life away from people, was actually glad that his granddaughter was there, but did not show it to Heidi. The old man prepared a nice cozy bed in the attic. Heidi loved her grandfather from the first sight, and happy times were about to begin for her in the mountains. When she woke up in the morning, she was introduced to her grandfather's very big dog, Joseph. Heidi loved Joseph. Then one day, when she was hiking on the hills, she met Peter the shepherd, who was grazing his goats on the meadows.
I haven't seen you around here before.
Yes, I just arrived. I'm going to live here with my grandfather from now on.
In the following days, Peter started to take Heidi with him to graze his goats in the meadows. They started to hike together in the mountains. Everything was so new and exciting for Heidi. She learnt a lot from Peter about how to be a shepherd. Even though he didn't show it much, Grandfather Elm loved Heidi very much. Running around and having fun on the fields all day long, Heidi was very happy, but she also never forgot to help her grandfather with the housework. And one of her favourites was to bake little bread in her grandfather's wood oven. She used to take the bread she made to Peter's grandmother, and Peter's grandmother would give her fresh goat's milk in return. One day, summer was over and it was winter time. When Peter started to go to school, Heidi was left alone and eventually got bored. She was really upset that she was too small to go to school like Peter. One day, Heidi's aunt came back to take Heidi to the city. She was going to get homeschooling and work. Grandfather Elm was very upset at first and did not accept it, but when he thought about it, he realised that it would be best for Heidi to stay in the city and learn to read and write.
Grandfather,
fussed Heidi. But she was convinced to go after her aunt promised her that she would be back on the mountains after a short while. Her aunt and Heidi arrived to a big mansion after a long train ride.
Wow! What a big house! I'm going to stay here?
Heidi met Clara, the little girl in the house. Clara could not walk because of an accident she had when she was a little child. Her aunt actually brought Heidi to this house to keep Clara company. Clara and Heidi got along really well and became best of friends. Not knowing much about the urban life, Heidi was making Clara laugh with her silly mistakes. Clara's grandmother was a very tough and strict lady.
Get up, you lazy girl. It's time to study. You still have a lot to learn.
Clara's grandmother was trying to teach Heidi a lot, from how to sit and stand up properly and how to use a knife and fork at the dinner table. And Heidi was even dressing like the ones who live in the city, but she wasn't feeling very comfortable in these dresses. Clara also helped Heidi to learn to read and write. Heidi did like being here with Clara and all, but she missed the mountains and her grandfather far too much. Heidi could not even eat because of her sadness. Her heart was full of longing. Clara's father and grandmother realized Heidi's sadness. After a while, they decided to send her next to her grandfather. But Clara was very sad because Heidi was leaving.
To truly love someone means to want their happiness at all costs,
said grandmother. At last it was time to say goodbye. While Heidi was leaving, her aunt told her that Clara was going to come and visit her in the mountains next year. Happy to be back in the mountains, she first stopped by Peter's house on her way home and gave the bread Clara sent to Peter's grandmother. Leaving her fancy dress behind, she went running home and hugged her grandfather as tight as she could. And they were happy again. A while later, Heidi was high in the clouds with happiness because of the letter she received saying that Clara was going to visit her soon. When in the Alps, Clara liked Peter a lot, but Peter was a bit hesitant because he was afraid that Heidi was going to go back to the city with Clara. Clara, Peter and Heidi were having the time of their lives on the hills. The fresh mountain air and natural foods were really good for Clara. But Peter started to get really jealous of Heidi because of her close friendship with Clara. Peter also did not like to carry Clara to her wheelchair and push her around. One day, he pushed Clara's wheelchair off from a cliff. He thought that this would solve everything. Without her wheelchair and the fresh mountain air, Clara became much stronger, and she even started to walk slowly with Heidi's help. After a while, she started to take steps with no one's help.
I can walk! Yay, Heidi! I owe this to you.
One day, Clara's father and grandmother came to visit, and when they saw Clara walking, they couldn't believe their eyes. They gave their thanks to Grandfather Alm and Heidi. At that moment, Peter felt really sorry about what he had done. He confessed to pushing Clara's wheelchair off the cliff.
I apologize to all of you. What I did was so very wrong.
We forgive you, right, Clara? Even though what you did was wrong, we are all happy that she's walking now.
They all laughed with joy. Clara and her family promised to come back next summer, and they all lived happily ever after. On a sunny day, Alice and her sister went out for a walk on the fields. Alice's sister was reading a book. Because of this, Alice got very bored. Right when she was thinking what she could do for fun, a white bunny passed by. The bunny was talking to himself. Alice was stunned because she had never seen a talking bunny before. The bunny took out a pocket watch and then...
Oh no, I'm going to be so late.
He said in a hurry. Alice was very impressed with what she saw. So curious to see what was going on, she went after the bunny. The bunny went through a hole in a tree trunk, and Alice followed him through the same hole. Suddenly, she found herself falling down in a well. The well was very deep, and Alice kept on falling down slowly. While going down, the little girl saw pictures, little wardrobes and shelves. Alice felt like she was going around the world. Finally, she fell on a soft surface. She had a long corridor in front of her. Alice got up and started to walk. She saw many locked doors along the corridor, and the bunny disappeared. Alice feared that she would not be able to get out of there. Right at that moment, she saw a little golden key on a 3-legged small table next to her. She took the key and tried to open all the locked doors, but the key was too small for the doors. Looking around sadly, Alice realized that there was another small door behind the curtain. When she put the key in the lock, the door opened immediately. Alice was very happy when the door opened. Behind the door, there was a very beautiful garden. But because she could not fit through the door, Alice could not go out. When she returned to the table inside, she noticed a bottle with a label saying, "Drink me" on it. Alice took the bottle and started drinking. As she drank the potion, she began to shrink. When she got small enough, she thought she could fit through the door. But when she got back to the key, she realized that she had gotten too small to reach the table. She started to cry. At that moment, she saw a cake on the floor. The cake had a label saying, "Eat me." With curiosity, Alice took a bite from the cake. At that moment, she started to grow again. Now she could get the key, but was too big to go through the door. Alice was too tired. With no hope, she started to cry again. The tears running from her eyes started to form a big puddle that reached the end of the corridor. Suddenly, the white bunny passed her in a hurry. Alice called out, Sir, please, hold on a minute, help me." The bunny got away fast, without even looking at Alice, but while running, he dropped his gloves and hand fan. Alice took his stuff from the floor, and when she started to fan herself, she started to shrink again. Right at that moment, she slipped and fell into the puddle. Alice and lots of different animals swimming in the water started to drift towards the shore. When they reached the shore, they were all wet, and Alice saw the bunny again. This time the bunny thought she was his maid and asked her to bring his gloves and hand fan from his house. Alice went to the bunny's house in the forest. When she entered, she immediately found his gloves and hand fan, but right there she saw another bottle on the table. She reached to the bottle and thought, "If I drink this, maybe I can go back to my normal size." She took the bottle and drank the whole potion. Instead, she became so huge she could not even move in the house.
What am I going to do now? How will I get out of here?
In the meantime, the bunny was waiting for Alice impatiently. Fearing from Alice, the animals started to throw rocks into the house, breaking windows. The stones landing next to Alice started to turn into small cakes. When Alice started to eat these cakes, she started to shrink again and managed to go out of the house. But this time, unfortunately, she got too small. Poor Alice got so tiny she was lost between the little bushes in the woods. She started to think about what she can do to get back to her normal size. At that moment, she saw a puppy a little further away. When she called the puppy over to pat, she realized how much smaller she was next to the dog. She almost got squashed by the puppy's paws. When she was running, she stumbled over a mushroom. There was a blue caterpillar on the mushroom. She asked the caterpillar what she can do to get back to her normal size. The caterpillar answered with a wise manner. One side of the mushroom I am standing on will make you grow. On the other side will make you shrink. Alice took a small piece from the mushroom and put it in her mouth. Right at that moment, she had gotten so big that she could not even see her feet. To shrink back to her normal size, this time she took a piece from the other side. By eating different amounts from both sides of the mushroom, she managed to come back to her normal size. She took 2 pieces from each side and held them in her hand. While she was walking, she came across a tiny house. But to be able to get in, she had to shrink again. Eating the mushroom pieces, she started to shrink again. When she entered the house, Alice found herself in a kitchen. Right in the middle of the kitchen, there was a duchess standing with a baby in her arms. And on the floor, a fat cat was looking at Alice, smiling. It was the first time Alice saw a smiling cat. So she asked, curiously,
Why does your cat smile like that?
"Because this is a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess. At the same time, the cat became invisible and the baby in the Duchess' arms started to cry. The Duchess passed the baby over to Alice. "You rock the baby and stop her crying. I will go and play croquet with the Queen." Alice took the baby and started to rock. Suddenly, the Cheshire Cat appeared. Again, and smiling again, he talked to Alice.
You need to find the Mad Hatter and the March Hare. But be careful, they're both crazy.
Right after their little chat, the Cheshire Cat disappeared again. Alice angrily yelled at the cat.
Stop disappearing and reappearing again! You're freaking me out!
Cheshire Cat appeared once again, smiling.
Okay, then I will disappear slowly.
Starting from his tail, Cheshire Cat started to disappear again. Only his face remained. Alice went out of the house, and in a short while she found the March Hare's house. March Hare was having tea with the Mad Hatter under a tree. March Hare put some hay between his ears. Alice could not understand why he put hay between his ears. And the Mad Hatter had a hat on his head. The mouse between them had rested his head on the table sleeping. And they both had their arms on the mouse, using him as a pillow. When they saw Alice coming, they opposed, saying that there was no space available.
No, there's plenty of room,
said Alice. Mad Hatter asked Alice.
Why do you think the crow looks like a desk?
Why do you think?
I don't know.
Alice got really bored of these stupid and rude jokes of the Mad Hatter and March Hare. She said, "This was the stupidest meeting I have been to," and went away. Alice noticed a door in the trunk of a tree. When she entered, she found a golden key. The golden key opened the door to a beautiful garden. Entering the garden, Alice was very surprised. The gardeners of the Queen of the Hearts were painting all the white roses to red, and all the men looked like playing cards. So Alice asked,
I'm curious, why are you painting all the white roses red?
So the gardener answered,
The Queen wanted red roses, but we accidentally grew white roses. If the Queen finds out, she will chop our heads off.
Right at that moment, the Queen of Hearts came to the garden. The soldiers next to her were all in the shape of playing cards. Queen of Hearts invited this strange girl she saw for the first time to play croquet. Alice never saw a croquet field like this one before. Hedgehogs were balls and flamingos were the croquet mallets. In the middle of the game, the players started to fight and throw hedgehogs at each other. The Queen was very upset with this situation. She suddenly stomped her foot on the floor and yelled with anger, "Chop off the heads of all the players who fight!" The Queen of Hearts was so angry, she cancelled the croquet party. And suddenly, there was a loud voice.
The trial has begun!
Everybody started to run towards the court. A trial was going to be held for Jack of Hearts, who supposedly had stolen a pie from the Queen's kitchen. The Queen could not catch the Jack of Hearts during this incident, therefore she could not punish him. The Jack of Hearts was held in prison during his trial. The White Rabbit started to read from the roll of paper he was holding.
On a beautiful summer day, our Queen of Hearts had baked delicious pies, and Jack of Hearts had stolen them.
The King yelled from his seat.
Call the first witness.
The first witness was the Mad Hatter. When the Mad Hatter started to talk on the witness stand in front of the King, Alice suddenly started to grow. The White Rabbit announced that it was time for Alice to take the witness stand. Hearing her name being called, Alice immediately stood up. Forgetting how big she grew, when her dress tangled on the jury stand, she turned the stand upside down, making all the members of the jury fall on the floor. The Queen asked Alice to tell everything she knows. "I don't know anything," Alice answered. The Queen yelled, furiously, "You don't? Chop her head off too!" And Alice answered bravely,
I don't care about your orders. You are not my queen, and so you can't do anything to me.
As soon as Alice said these words, the King, Queen, and all the playing cards started to fly towards Alice. Screaming away, Alice tried to catch them. All the commotion became a big whirlpool of cards around Alice, sucking her inside and flying her up. And finally, with the leaves flying all around her, she found herself on the field again. Her sister called out, "Alice, come on now, wake up!" When Alice woke up, she realised that everything was a dream.
Oh, wow. It was all a dream, and what an amazing dream it was. Hey, sis, let me tell you about my dream. You know, a white rabbit...
Once there lived a family not too far out from where we all lived. The Darling family. The Darling family had 3 children. Their names were Jan, Michael, and Wendy. Wendy would always tell her mum how Peter Pan would always play the flute in her room. Her mother would always tell her that she was imagining things, but couldn't help but notice the leaves in the room, which always confused her a bit. Wendy would always say that the leaves fall off Peter Pan. One night, when their parents went out for the night, the kids were left home all alone, and when they got sleepy, they all went to sleep. Peter Pan silently entered their room and started looking for the leaves he had left behind. At that moment, Wendy woke up.
Peter Pan, I was waiting for you. Nobody would believe that you're real.
Wendy gave back the leaves she had been hiding for Peter. She really liked Peter, and so they sewed his leaves back on his clothing.
Wendy, would you like me to tell you an amazing adventure story?
I don't want to hear about an adventure. I want to live one, Peter Pan.
Right at that moment, Peter's small fairy friend, Tinkerbell, entered through the window.
Well, of course. I knew you'd be here. Are you getting ready for a new adventure without me?
You know it's not possible for me to do anything without you.
Wendy woke her siblings up. Her siblings looked at Peter Pan and Tinkerbell with great confusion.
Well, are you ready to fly?
Tinkerbell scattered her fairy dust and off they went floating into thin air, and all together they left the house. The kids headed towards Neverland at once. After a long journey, they arrived at Neverland, and there they were. The mermaids, wild animals, Indians, pirates, and the lost boys were there too. Amongst them all was the most dangerous of them, called Captain Hook. Captain Hook was Peter Pan's enemy. The reason for this was because when they were fighting, Peter cut his arm and a huge crocodile ate it. Along with his arm, he also swallowed his watch, and because of this, the crocodile would always make a tick-tock noise. And so Captain Hook would always know if the crocodile was near from the noise. When looking around with his binoculars on the deck, Captain Hook spotted Peter Pan and kids looking at him from the top of a hill. He immediately ordered the men to fire the cannons. It was very hard for Peter Pan and the kids to get away from the cannons.
Tinkerbell, you take the kids to a safe place. I will deal with Hook.
Tinkerbell was very jealous of Wendy, so she wanted to keep her away from Peter Pan. With some made-up excuse, she left Wendy back on the hill and brought Jan and Michael to a safe place down at the beach.
The lost boys who lived on the island saw Wendy from afar, and thinking that she was an enemy, they wounded her. At the same time, Peter Pan was fighting with Captain Hook, but seeing the crocodile that got his arm suddenly reappearing, Hook ran away in fear.
Ah! Whilst Peter Pan was coming back, he saw Wendy lying on the rocks wounded, and he was very upset.
And the lost boys were very sorry when they realized that the girl that they had wounded was Peter Pan's friend.
I have left the kids in your care.
Tinkerbell was so sorry. She also realized that what she did was wrong.
I am so sorry, Peter. This will never happen again, I promise.
Lost boys made a beautiful home for Wendy and her brothers. At night, they all would sleep in the house underneath the trees, listening to Wendy's stories. And Peter Pan would keep guard in front of the house. One day, when they were resting on the rocks, they spotted the pirates approaching. The pirates took the Indian chief's daughter hostage. Peter Pan and the boys went after to save the chief's daughter. And there was a big battle between them and the pirates. In the end, they saved his daughter and brought her to the chief. After that day, the Indians, Peter Pan, and the lost boys became very close friends. In fact, the chief ordered 2 of his best men in Peter Pan's command to guard the boys. Of course, Captain Hook was furious about this.
One day I will beat you, Peter Pan, and you will not be able to get away.
One night, when Wendy started to tell the story of her family, Peter realized how much she and her brothers missed their home. So he told them that they could go back if they wanted to, but that he wanted to stay. When they all were packing up for their long journey, they were attacked by the pirates. The pirates caught the boys after they set up a trap to the Indians and captured them. Peter Pan was sleeping at home, not knowing all that happened to the boys. Captain Hook saw him sleeping, but he could not open the door to Peter Pan's treehouse. Still, he poured the poison in the bottle he was carrying under the door, causing Peter Pan to sleep for hours. Peter Pan slept one whole day, and when he woke up, Tinkerbell entered. After she told him all that had happened, Peter Pan and Tinkerbell went out to rescue the boys. When they arrived to the Happy Rock, the pirates' headquarters, they saw that there was no pirate on guard. And when they went over to the other side of the rock, they were shocked from what they saw. Wendy, Jan, and Michael and the lost boys were all tied up to the poles, and Captain Hook was holding a torch in flames.
Say your last words.
As their eldest, Wendy began to talk.
Dear friends, my last words to you will be the words your real mothers would have told you. If they were here, they would have told you not to be afraid and be courageous to face your death. Don't be afraid. Kindness always wins. Always.
Captain Hook got very angry with Wendy's words, so he brought her to the boat and tied her to the big pole. At this moment, Peter Pan and Tinkerbell reached out to save the boys. At the same time, the Indians and their chief came to help. This made Peter Pan so happy, because with their help, they rescued the boys. It was now time to get Wendy. Peter Pan and the Lost Boys got on Captain Hook's ship, where only a few pirates remained. And when they realized that they would be beaten, they jumped off the ship.
There's nowhere to hide, Hook. Surrender!
Peter Pan and the Lost Boys started to charge towards Captain Hook, pushing him to walk backwards, and suddenly he heard the noise, the one noise that he was most afraid of. When Captain Hook looked back in fear, he saw the croc waiting for him to fall down into the water.
Help!
In a flash, he ran to the other side of the boat, jumped and started to swim as fast as he could. Peter Pan and the Lost Boys began to laugh. From that moment on, Hook's ship belonged to the Lost Boys and their captain was Peter Pan.
The crew is ready for your orders, Captain Peter.
Sail away!
The boys untied the ropes and the sails blew up with all their might.
Tinkerbell, fly us away to the home of the Darling family.
The kids were very happy to hear this. Wendy, Jan and Michael were going to reunite with their parents they had dearly missed. When Tinkerbell sprinkled the fairy dust, suddenly the ship was airborne and started to fly in the sky. Wendy was restless to get home and tell her parents all about Peter Pan, Tinkerbell and the Neverland. From that day on, Neverland was going to be their second home and Peter Pan their best friend.
Once upon a time, there lived a farmer who had a donkey. This donkey worked for very long years to serve his owner, carrying sacks of flour and wheat. But as the years passed, the donkey got older and lost his strength. Understanding that he lost his ability to work around the farm, one early morning, he left the farm and started on a long journey.
I don't have my strength anymore. But still have my beautiful voice. I can go to Bremen and sing there for my living.
Along his way, he came across a hound dog lying on the road.
What are you doing lying down like that?
I'm a hound dog, but as I got older, I lost my speed. I cannot help my owner in hunting anymore.
Then I have an offer for you. I am going to Bremen to become a singer.
Come with me. Join the band. I'll play the mandolin and you can play the drums.
The dog liked the offer, so he went along with the donkey. Not long after, they saw a cat sitting on the roof of a house along the road. The cat looked very sad.
What's up, kitty cat? You look very sad. What happened?
I'm older now. I have lost my energy to run, and I no longer have my beautiful sharp teeth. Instead of chasing mice, I sit across the fireplace and get lazy. That's why my so-called owner kicked me out of the house.
Then you should also come with us.
With you? And you're going where?
To Bremen. We're going to form a band and become singers. Cats are usually very familiar with music. You can come and play the harmonica with us.
The cat liked the offer, so off she went and joined the band. When these three rascals were passing in front of a farm, they saw a rooster crowing on a fence post.
It's nearly noon, Mr. Rooster. Why are you still crowing?
Tomorrow is Sunday. My owner's wife calls over guests on Sundays. They're planning on serving me to the guests.
Why do you keep staying here? Why don't you run away?
Where can I go? Today is my last day anyway, so I will crow until I can't no more.
Okay. Don't waste your voice like this. Come with us to Bremen. We're building a band and we can use a strong voice like yours.
The rooster liked the offer and accepted it immediately. He jumped off the fence and joined their journey. The four of them hit the road together.
Let's spend the night resting in the forest. We'll continue tomorrow.
Before sleeping, the rooster went sneaking around, and from the very high point he was on,
I can see a light ahead. There should be a house very nearby.
Then let's get up and go there. I am not used to sleeping in a dark forest like this.
Yeah, and maybe I can find a bone or two to eat.
all agreed and started to walk to the place where the light came from. Finally, they arrived to a house. Being the tallest of them all, the donkey approached the window, looked inside.
What do you see, Brother Donkey?
What do I see? I see a beautifully set dinner table.
That's great!
I see all kinds of food and drinks on the table.
I'm already drooling.
Come on, let's get inside.
Wait up, I'm not finished. And I see 4 armed burglars eating and drinking at the table.
Hearing the word burglar, they all were very disappointed.
Did there have to be burglars? I was so hungry.
There's nothing to do. Let's head back to the forest.
I wish there was a way to scare these burglars away from here.
Okay, look, I have a great plan. Listen to me carefully. Have ever
Four friends formed a tower jumping on top of each other. Then, with the donkey's signal, they all started to sing. When they heard this horrible noise, the burglars jumped in the air with fear. The four friends broke the window and jumped inside with a big crash.
Run away! Run for your lives! Help! Run away! Run for your lives! Help!
Leaving their weapons, the burglars left the house in a panic and started running towards the woods. The four rascals were very happy that everything went to plan. They immediately sat on the table and started to eat the delicious food that the burglars had left behind. After the meal, they all looked for a cozy place to have a good night's sleep because they were very tired. They turned out all the lights and went to bed. It was past midnight now. The burglars had a look to see that there was no light in the house. They sent one of them to check on the house. The burglar found that it was very quiet and wanted to light up a lamp. As soon as he lit the match, the cat jumped on him and scratched his face with his claws. The dog bit his leg. Waking up to all that noise, the rooster started to crow his lungs out. And just when the burglar got the chance to run out on the front porch, the donkey gave him a really strong kick with the back of his legs. Abandoned by what just happened, the burglar ran off next to the others.
In the house, there's not one but 4 monsters. They all attacked me.
The lot of them ran off without looking back and did not show the courage to come back to the house ever again. The 4 Bremen musicians really liked this house. So they all gave up on the idea of going to Bremen and decided to move in together into this lovely home where they spent all their days singing and making music.